All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of February 20th, 2024. We call the meeting to order at 7:07 p.m. If we would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is an ANR, approval not required. The purpose of this plan is to create 4 lots for Derek Varley, Assessor's Map 126, Lot 250, and located at 278 Tremont Street in the Residential Agricultural Zoning District. Do we have anybody here to represent that project? Please step forward. If you could state your name for us.
Joe Webby, Webby Engineering, and with me is Scott Varley.
Mr. Webby. I just have for the most part, everything looks fine on this, but one of the issues that we face here is that no rear lot can be created if the property hasn't been held in common ownership prior to May 4th, 1998. It's section 2344 of the zoning bylaws. So we didn't know if you wanted the opportunity to withdraw without issue on this, and redefine the lot lines in regards to this.
Well, let me ask the question first, is why do you
Joe,
think...
would you identify yourself if you didn't already?
Joe Webby, Webby Engineering. Why do you think that it was not held in common ownership as of May 4th, 1998?
Because on your application it says the title of this land is derived from Carl Johnson, January 21st, 2005.
Yeah, but wouldn't that carry over if the Johnsons held it in common ownership?
I can't answer that question.
In other words, it still was in common ownership in 1998, May 4th.
You can, I'm not sure with the legal definition of common ownership if there is a change of title in regards to ownership on the property. Mr. Varney, is he? Varley, I'm sorry. It's tough to read your signature here, and I'm getting older. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Was he owner of the property or on the deed prior to 1990?
No, he does not own the property as of today. He would like to buy the property.
Oh, okay. Mr. Johnson owns it now, and he
Yes, he does.
he was listed on the deed prior to 2005 or 1998.
I can't answer that question without looking at the deeds, but it would still have been, in my mind, it still would have been in one ownership. There was no separation of lots after 1998.
Right, but there was a change in ownership from one person to another. And that would mean that it hasn't been held in the common ownership.
Well, I think this is where we may be disagreeing. If he owned all the property, if the person before the Johnsons owned it as one property, wouldn't that be in common ownership?
If the person before whom? If before 2005?
Yes.
It has, according to the bylaws, it has to be held by the same person since 1998, right?
Well, I don't read it that way, but it's your bylaw. If you tell me that's what it is, then...
In order to be eligible for a rear lot, such property or set of continuous properties held in common ownership as of May 4th, 1998 shall not have been divided after such date.
It doesn't mean that it was not conveyed. It just means it could not be divided. The property has not been divided after 1998.
Not more than one rear lot should be created. It's not how I read it.
So if I may, so 2 things on this. We've had a couple of these that have come up since I've been here, one for Edgewood Boggs quite some time back. The thing I recommended, and like I said, I told Joe, I talked to Joe just before I got here, my apologies. I'm like, I looked at your plan. By the way, you may have an issue with this. So Joe got this news about a minute before he sat down. So what I recommended to folks is, check with the building commissioner on how he reads that, because the building commissioner is the person who interprets the zoning bylaw. The second thing that I did is I went and took a look at the assessor's records. Now keep in mind, the assessor's records are only collected for the purposes of setting the rates of taxation. And I say that every time, because we rely on them when we look at things, but they're not the standard for this. So in the assessor's records, it starts with 12/17/1999 with J.W. and Lita M. Johnson. And then in 2005 to Carl David Johnson, and then at the same time in 2005 to Douglas Johnson. Now, there's probably a lot of people named Johnson. They're probably likely,
they're all related.
They're likely all in the same family. So one of those questions that comes up is, well, where a piece of property passed generationally within the family, how do we look at that? So that's why I recommend, when we have something like this, consult with the building commissioner and, get his opinion on how he reads that. But from my take, looking at just what I have from the admitted inadequate assessor's records, is that if this property was transferred in 1999, then it wouldn't, to someone outside of the Johnsons, it likely wouldn't be eligible under the bylaw. So the two things that I would say is check with Rod on that interpretation. And if you've got something titled or something like that that just shows that this is, the sort of chain custody of the property, title search, whatever, it shows, because I think you can't really tell what legislative intent is, but I would think that the intent of this bylaw was to keep people from coming in and buying a piece of property and flipping it. That'd be my first take why someone would have something like that. But I don't think legislative intent would be to penalize a family, to say we moved it from, grandpa to son to grandson, and now we're going to say, no, you can't, use your family property for that. So that's my two takes on what we're looking at this evening.
I think part of the issue with it was the legislation that was meant to get rid of rear lots and in regards to over the period of time. So again, as it stands now, we couldn't approve it because it's not the same name and it's changed hands.
Well, in that case, we would like to withdraw without prejudice.
Which would be fine.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be a problem bringing it back, and if you bring it back, to waive the fees in regards to this?
Yeah. So just shoot me a quick note on withdrawing the application. Set up an appointment with Rod. We'll talk during the week, and if we got it all set, the good news about last week's snowstorm is we meet again next week.
Okay.
So we'll be back here in 7 days.
Is that okay? Very good.
All right.
Would it make a difference if the Johnsons were the ones before us to divide the land first?
Well, I think the issue is that the Johnsons, after the property's been split, could convey it to anybody. So essentially the Johnsons, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, the Johnsons are separating the parcels into separate properties, and they are looking to convey one to Mr. Farley. So there's no prohibition about somebody selling a piece of property, they divide it. So they held it since 1641, and they decided to divide it and sell a parcel to Mr. Varley. There's no prohibition on Mr. Varley buying a piece of property and building on it. It's buildable lot.
But if they were to come, then if they were the ones with the application and they divided it first, there shouldn't be a problem
That's what
with
I'm
ownership.
saying. If Mr. Farley was doing this right today because he bought the property and wanted to split into three, he'd be SOL. But because it's the Johnsons who have been the custodians of the land, I think they're eligible, provided we can show that. Rod says, that's fine, this is how I interpret the bylaw in the common ownership issue. I think we're good to go.
And we have something from the Johnsons stating that this is their plan, like.
Well, they signed the application, right? We got a signature of them on the application.
Oh, okay. I don't have it on my application. Oh, it looks like, yeah, it's stamped.
I thought there were two Johnsons.
I see it. Yep, I see them now. Yep.
Because the check is from,
And I would like Ms. Questle to give us her opinion on the matter. Please, Mr. Bott. So the chair will make a motion to allow the applicant to withdraw the ANR without prejudice.
I'll second that,
I
or make
need-
that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Williams,
And I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Robinson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Robinson. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gatsky.
Go ahead, John. Mr. Gasky says aye.
Mr. Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right. Our next order of business is Power Plus 31 Rear Main Street decommissioning bond discussion prior to issuance of electrical permit per special condition number 19. Lighting plan for approval prior to issuance of electrical permit per special permit condition 20. I believe Mr. Glines had a couple.
Yes, in your packet, you will have two things. You'll have Andy's memo, his review, as well as an email from the town administrator. So part of that process was the involvement of the town administrator. So he and I have been working on this together. And in his email as of 3:45 this afternoon, Tom, please share with the planning board, I have reviewed the decommissioning bond and the board's consulting engineer, Fuss & O'Neill's review, and have referred both to town council for their review of the form of the bond to ensure that the decommissioning mechanism remains in effect for the life of the project. Best regards, Bob Fennessy.
One of the conditions for Mr. Glines is confirm that lighting system will include a timer or automatically turn the site lighting on and off dusk to dawn. It's my understanding that the lights will only be used if somebody's working on site.
Yeah, Chris Caranta for Plus Power, and yes, the lights are going to be manually controlled. They will have a sensor that if they were left on, that they would shut off at dusk, at dawn, but they need to be physically turned on to begin with. They won't come on automatically. There will be no timer to turn them on or anything like that.
Restrict the use of type 2 and type 5 distributors.
I can weigh in on that if you'd
Please.
like. Andy Glines with Fuss & O'Neill, town's engineering consultant. The applicant provided product cut sheets for the lighting they were proposing. Some of the model numbers included on those cut sheets included some uplighting. Basically, they diffuse the light more, but have higher uplighting. So I guess I just wanted the applicant to confirm that the model that they were specifying was dark sky compliant and didn't have that uplighting component. It's the same product, it's just a different version of that product, so.
Yeah, confirmed. Yeah, well, there will be no we will use the models that provide 0% uplight.
And the decommissioning amount of $2 million is what we're talking about?
Yeah, so Fuss & O'Neill reviewed the decommissioning bond estimate. We had a couple minor clarifications on the expenses table, but didn't feel that those would drastically change the total estimate amount. So we're recommending a $2 million bond amount, which is more than what the applicant estimated for the total decommissioning cost, but less than the 125% that the town regulations allow to impose on the applicant.
And this is based on the figures from 20 years from now?
Well, yeah, correct. There's, I guess I deferred to the town council to weigh in on how to bind the applicant to that decommissioning bond throughout that time period, and other municipalities sometimes impose new estimates periodically throughout that 20-year span. But I guess that's more up to, town council to kind of weigh in on the legal aspects of that.
Right, because so this is currently based on the decommissioning costs of what year?
Current is, well, the estimate is based on current numbers, based on what the applicant has available, and Fussin O'Neill has available to review. But as we all know, especially over the last couple of years, there are price fluctuations. So it would be in the best interest for the town to be able to, as part of the agreement on the decommissioning bond, be able to reassess, over, 5-year intervals to make sure that the bond amount is still sufficient. But Fussin O'Neill, didn't weigh in on the legal aspects of that aspect.
Right, no,
of
I
the
was
bond.
just looking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years on the review.
Yeah, so the trick is, with something that has a 20-year, 30-year life, we're not going to be here making sure that things are just swell. So it's that's why council's involved in ensuring that we have a decommissioning bond that is viable for the life of the project. Whether it's an escrow, whether it's cash, whether it is a bond from a bonding company, to make sure that escalation factors are in there and that the town doesn't get left in the lurch. And so that's why we send those things to town council. This isn't new ground for them, it's new ground for us. So they've had it in their inbox for a bit now. I've poked them a couple times just to let them know meetings are coming up. But our conversations with the folks at Plus Power, they're comfortable with the bond amount and fully understand that town council is reviewing the bond as to the form of the bond. So as of tonight, when the planning board looks with Andy's recommendations and the town administrator's recommendations, we'll close the books on this and have town council finish their review and get back to what that actual bond amount is, or what the actual form of the bond is.
Right, right.
Bond amount is set at $2 million with Andy's modifications and recommendations. So now in town council's hands to make sure that the bond stays in place for the life
Right.
of the project.
The bond will stay in place, but if the costs go up in 10 years, is the bond going to be reassessed?
Well, that's where we get into how do we make sure the bond is effective for the life of the project. So
Right.
that's the town council in that, and
Okay.
setting the form of the bond.
Well, it's setting the form, and it's going to be $2 million, but say 10 years down the line, it's going to cost 2.4 to decommission it.
Yeah.
Has it been reassessed in that 10-year period?
So once again, town council's role is to ensure that the bond amount is adequate for the life of the project and make sure those escalators are in there.
Okay.
To ensure that the bond amount escalates at the rate it's allowed to, and we're in good shape at the end of the useful life of the project, whether it's 20 or 30 years.
All right. Any questions or concerns from the board?
I don't know if this pertains to what we're talking about, but there's a statement you made, Andy, that says, I assume that stormwater basins were increased in order to receive the additional stormwater runoff. Instead of having to assume something, can we get clarity on that?
Yes, I guess when I was reviewing the submitted documents as part of the conditional review, there was plan sheet as part of the SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, and the basin grading looked slightly larger than what the original basin size was, but I don't see that as a issue increasing the size, but I don't know if the applicant can weigh in on that aspect. It wasn't really the scope of Fussin O'Neill's review for this. We were focusing on the decommissioning plan and the lighting, but I did want to point that out just because it may be something that is looked at when we're doing final construction inspection to make an advisement to the town and the building official to issue a certificate of occupancy. So.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Do you have a particular preference over which plan set?
I think the one that's included in the attached to the SWIP is the latest and greatest, but I just want to make sure that that is the plans that the applicant is going to be submitting to the building official, and signed off, so that we're all, when this project is constructed, both Fuss and O'Neill, the planning board, and the building official are all looking at the same sheets, and there's no, question about, if there was any tweaks here or there.
Can we confirm what plan sheet we're looking at, we're going to be?
Yeah, and maybe for clarification, the SWIP
You gotta identify yourself every time.
every time? Sorry.
Yeah, because our minute ticker can't see you.
Got it, sorry. Chris Caranta from Plus. The plan set that is dated November 14th is what was submitted to the building commissioner with the SWIP plan and what the building permit was issued on. So the project is in construction.
Yeah,
In
that's
compliance
sufficient,
with
just
this.
clarification that
Okay.
I needed.
Excellent. Any more questions, concerns, or comments? Seeing none, the chair will accept a motion to approve the decommissioning bond and the lighting plan for Power Plus 31 Rear Main Street, Carver.
I will make that said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Robinson,
Second.
second by Ms. Sordillo. Do you have any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gatsky.
Don Geske says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
And Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all. Good night.
Our next order of business is public hearing continued on the application of Plymouth Elks Lodge, number 1476, requesting a site plan review pursuant to sections 3100 of the Carver zoning bylaw for property located at 169 South Meadow Road in Carver, Assessors Map 113, Lot 70E, portion of in the Airport Zoning District. Applicant proposes to construction a 2,520 square foot building with all associated parking, driveways, stormwater management, utilities, landscaping, and appurtenances. We received a request for continuance from the applicant to give them time, an opportunity to review and address the initial peer review comments. So if there's no concerns from the board, the chair will accept a motion to continue the public hearing on the application of Plymouth Elks Lodge number 1476 to February 27th, 2024, 7 p.m., room 1, Carver Town Hall.
I will make that said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Robinson,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Sordillo. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gatsky.
Don Geske says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Our next order of business is on a public hearing continued on the application of Route 44 Development LLC requesting a definitive subdivision approval entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan for Route 44 Development LLC, Route 44 Commerce Park, pursuant to the Carver Subdivision Control Bylaw for property located at off Green Park Way, formerly known as Montello Street. Assessors Map 20, lots 2, 2-1, and 14, and Map 22, lots 3, 3A, 3B, 3C, 3-1, 4, 5A, 10, 10-1, and 11 in Carver, Mass., showing 4 proposed non-residential lots in the Green Business Park District. Excellent. Do we have any new information in regards to this?
If I may. So in your packets, you have, I emailed copies of the draft bylaw, copies of the draft decision last week. Those are copies of decisions I shared with the applicant, I shared with the folks at MIPA, and sent to the board as well. Connie had some suggestions for the decision, So in your packets, you likely have a colorful sort of draft decision, says draft on it. There are some places that are highlighted in yellow. There are some places that are highlighted in blue, and there is some text in green. And I'll be happy to go through all those with you if you'll like.
I didn't see any green.
Actually, that's because I got the email at 3:54 after you guys, that I had print that the second time. So let's start with the green, if we can. So at the bottom of page 3 on your decision. There we are. And on the big screen here. We have been, after we met with MIPA, Connie had requested a letter from MIPA, which we hadn't seen for a bit. I did get an email late this afternoon from Jennifer Hughes of MIPA, who said we won't be supplying a letter, but we did review your draft decision and suggested you include, and this is the text that I put in green, MIPA staff did wish to clarify that future requirements noting that a notice of project change may be required by the MIPA office when a new or amended project is submitted. So
It kind of makes the next sentence irrelevant.
yeah, and so the stuff in the blue is, well, it started off as yellow that you put in, so I highlighted the blue to make sure we talked about that. So I think that covers the issue. One of the other things I wanted to point out is that the statement about Middleborough water that you had suggested.
Right, that was just a recommendation from
Yeah.
McLaughlin, and I would be fine removing it as long as it should be noted that,
Yeah. And I want to point out is that we can't take our ability to give permission for something to approve contingent on someone else.
right, yep.
So,
Nope, that's his, that was his thing, and,
So if I take that stuff out in blue,
well, the DEP did make note that any further subdivision of the property receive a termination to the DEP in regard to water supply and wastewater requirements.
well, but
That is-
that's for a project,
But
not for a subdivision.
But here's the problem. No water and wastewater was provided as per the requirements of the site plan review. So,
There's been no site plan review.
well, I mean, what are we approving, a subdivision plan?
Subdivision. And the subdivision shows there's water lines in the road, so the water lines are there, and what
But there's no
DEP
water.
said, is that don't connect the water to the North Carver water system until essentially they're a functional, and I shouldn't say that, at this time because the plant's offline. So that was his statement, and that is one of the conditions that's in the decision. The water lines should be put in the ground, but they shouldn't be connected to North Carver water until North Carver water is fully functioning.
Well, it should have been provided where the water's coming from and where the wastewater was going as part of the application process. It wasn't in there. I'm fine with waiving that. It should be noted in the decision in regards to that it was waived, though.
So once again, a wastewater and traffic counts and all those sort of things, all those things that are in the MIPA review or in the section 61.
We're not talking about that.
Those all relate to a project to be
We're
developed.
talking about the definitive subdivision plan requires that they be put on it.
Yep.
And they weren't.
So the water lines are on the plan.
We're not talking water lines, we're talking water. Water source and septic. And they're not on the plans.
That is not part of subdivision control.
It's-
Subdivision
it's-
control
it's
is
part of
where is
the
the road?
application.
Where are the lots? Where are the utilities?
We have our list of what's required in the application, and it does say specifically where's the water going to come from and where's it going to go. It wasn't provided. I told you I'm fine, myself personally, granting a waiver for that, but it should be noted in the decision.
Yeah.
Because it's not noted in the request for waivers.
If I may, I believe, as Through this process and through the peer
Zach,
review.
can you tell people who you were?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Zach Richards with Bowler, site civil engineer. You know, in coordination with the peer review consultant, I think that the applicant has properly shown and described the ability to provide both water and sewer. And that's been captured in memos, it's been reviewed by the peer review consultant, and I think everyone has found that acceptable. Again, we're not proposing any septic system, so we're not showing a proposed septic system
Again, I
as part
told
of
you I'm
it.
fine with it,
Or water, yeah.
but it wasn't provided up for in the application, and that should be noted.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that we did address sewer and water in the application. We're not proposing
Well, you
a septic
addressed it.
system as part of it.
You addressed it by saying that currently there is none, and it will be decided later on down the line.
And that there
And
is,
I just want to make sure that that's noted in the decision.
understood.
All right, so the next section is Connie's add to the decision. And I think this is from perhaps the preliminary plan previously, this sort of language. In the opinion of the planning board chair, Cornelius Shea, the definitive subdivision plan is so different from the preliminary subdivision plan application as not to have originated from the preliminary subdivision plan application, but aligns much more closely with what was presented, studied, and done through state agencies, MEPA, Secretary of Conservation and Energy's Department of Housing and Urban Development in the North Carver Urban Renewal Plan. So that seemed sort of an editorial statement, which
Well,
was...
it's part of how I can approve it based on this, because it is much more closely represented by what was proposed back in 2019. So it's what we were expecting, and therefore...
Like I said, it's
feel-
largely an editorial comment. It doesn't have rule of law.
Well, we have to put down why we're approving it, and clearly this isn't the same as what was put forward in the application, which was a short little subdivision road, and this is a far more extensive, and it far more closely aligns with what was originally presented and what we had some expectation of in the urban renewal plan.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it has an effect one way or the other. I don't think that's, the issue with this, including Middleborough in the decision, is one of those things that...
Right, that's fine.
Yeah,
Nope.
But this is, to me...
That was just the recommendation from DEP, and that's fine.
This, to me, is just, like I said, a statement in the decision. And I think the last thing we had, where was that at?
Condition number 10, which describes the route.
Yep.
It ends at turning right towards Route 44, and it should be that all heavy trucks should be entering Route 44 at that point, east or west, as we discussed and as was proposed by the applicant in their trucking route. Although they only put west on there, and I don't see how only being able to go one direction on the road would be really work out for them.
So under condition 10, consistent with the truck routing and circulation exhibit EXA prepared by Bowler dated 1/3/24, all construction vehicles shall leave the site by making a right turn and traveling south on Green Parkway, formerly known as Montello Street, towards Main Street, Route 58, and again turning right towards Route 44. No construction vehicles shall travel northbound into Plymouth or on either Montello Street or Main Street. So you want to have this say that those construction vehicles go enter and leave by that same route?
No, that as proposed by the applicant, that they go onto Route 44 rather than traveling through the town, as it was proposed by the applicant. It could change in the future, but currently, that was what was proposed, and I think that was what we agreed on. You only put the westbound travel on it, and I think eastbound should be included in that.
Okay, yeah, I apologize. From what my recollection, it was both eastbound and westbound.
Yeah,
But
so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe you updated and it's just.
yeah,
it's
that may have been
slipped.
the case.
Minimize dust, all trucks should be covered, wet suppression should be used. How are we going to work the completion of roadway and utilities? A bond?
So when a subdivision is approved, there is a covenant that comes with it. And that covenant says that no lot can be conveyed unless it's been released by the planning board. So we start off a subdivision with a plan in place and a covenant. When the developer wishes to have a bond released, that's when we send Fuss and O'Neill out, who's been out on the property prior to ask for somebody for inspections. So when they get to the point where the roadway is in and they come to us and ask to have a lot released, at that point, that's when we propose a surety bond to ensure that the work is completed. So they break ground January 1st. They work until September. In September, they say, we'd like to release a lot. Andy goes out there, makes an inspection, estimates a bond amount, and the applicant submits to the town one of 3 bonds that are allowable under Massachusetts general law. None of those, for future board members, none of those involve holding on a lot.
Right.
Never.
No, wait.
We have too many of those in
old.
town already. Never hold a lot. It's not surety. It's bad.
I'm not sure if we've made a determination on the major streets.
I think that the determination was they're all major streets.
We did vote on that
Yep.
then. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to, and it was something that was discussed, but it should be discussed amongst the board, because it was in the fear. Traffic levels, when they reach a certain point, 400 cars a day at intersections. Left turn lanes should be installed at all intersections and crossovers. I'm asking the board for discussion in regards to that, as it should be included in this once the traffic reaches a certain level. And this is what's recommended in the fear.
Can you repeat that one? Sorry.
Once more than 400 cars per day pass through an intersection, left turn lanes should be installed.
So you're saying they're gonna build a road a certain width, then you're gonna count the cars, and if it gets over 400, you gotta add on to the road?
That's something they'll have to work out themselves, but yes, that is part of what was discussed in the Secretary of Energy's
Add on
final
to the road,
environmental
move the
impact.
sidewalk, move the lights.
So
Well,
if I may.
It's going to have to be built, it's supposed to be built in for the future anyways, but we also don't know at what point or how quickly this property is going to develop. It's going to take a minimum of a year anyways before any sort of project is completed but
Yeah, so if I may, condition number 11, traffic studies need to be prepared and updated as individual lots are submitted for site plan review and special permits after the subdivision is completed and lots are released. So at this point, as I said, all we have is a road and lots. So when they come in for site plans and special permits, at that point, we'll be doing those traffic studies, determine what sort of mediation is required under the final environmental impact report, what you can call in the FEAR. So the
Right,
process is you build the roads, and in this case, we've identified all those things that were in those other documents that said prior to any occupancy, which includes crosswalks and sidewalks and those sort of things. But as far as knowing when you trip those thresholds, the only way to know when you trip those thresholds is when someone comes in for a project. And we look at those traffic counts and says, at this traffic count, you hit that threshold of 400 cars a day, 250 cars a day, and you have to comply with the requirements of MEPA and the Section 61 findings. At that point, there's a project. But at the point there's a subdivision, it's much like the water. We're putting the water in, the water.
well, I don't want any surprises in the future. This is something that should be done, and it's recommended to be done. But I understand your point that it should be addressed based on that, but isn't there a requirement for a traffic management professional?
When there's a project, but not, no, there's no uses for the lot. It's a road in 4 lots.
Okay.
So we stipulate, and MIPA suggested, they may have to come back to MIPA, and all of these documents, and it's peppered throughout the decision, when there's a project, when there's a special permit, and when there's a site plan, that's when you start to look at those thresholds. And this says in 11, traffic studies will need to be prepared as those individual lots are sold, because right now you got an empty subdivision. If there's one guy living on one lot, that's 10 trips a day. That's not much of a,
That's fine. I can handle that.
All right.
But again, any questions or concerns, comments from the board?
I don't have any at this time.
Seeing none. It is a public hearing. Do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I don't believe so. We had an opportunity to review the conditions, I believe, before these recent additions, so this was a couple weeks back, but did review those and provided just some minor comments, some cleanup items, some clarifications for consideration, but otherwise found those acceptable.
All right. All right, thank you very much. It is a public hearing. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Please, if you just identify yourself.
Yep, Steve Hoig, Plimpton resident. I'm just curious.
Steve, would you please talk to the microphone? Sorry.
Okay, I'm just curious about the water issue. Is that definitely going to happen? Are we going to build all this out there? It's going to be a great place for kids to go out there, hang out and whatnot. Are they going to be able to get water out there eventually? Or we don't know?
That's not, we just don't know. They don't know. What we do know is that the DEP seemed fairly positive it won't be coming from the North Carver Water District.
Right.
And that's where it is. And they'll want to, that was in the blue that was up there, one of the recommendations or requirements as proposed by the DEP. James McLaughlin of the DEP was any plan change other than what was approved require that notification must receive MIPA approval. He made note that any further subdivision of the property must receive a determination through the DEP in regard to water supply and wastewater requirements. And again, and one of his recommendations was that Middleborough Water should be represented on all future
Right.
talks in this, which we can't force that, so.
Right.
So,
It just seems to, why are you doing all this work if we're not even going to be able to put water in there?
right,
I mean, that's going to be a hangout for kids. Our property is right behind there. We have Middleborough water because it's so contaminated out there. I just think you're doing a lot of work for something that may not happen, and it's going to cause a problem out there. You're going to have the police out there with the kids. They're going to have a grand time out there.
yeah.
And that's near our property, and I don't want to have to deal with it.
All right, what about, what can we put in for measures to prevent? Or is that the property's owners?
That's the property owner's issue, There's probably kids out there now.
Oh, they're out there all the time
Yeah.
now. Now they're going to have a nice road to go up and ride up with their quads and whatnot. I mean, it's just going to cause more problems
Right.
than we need.
And
And
damage,
this is something that may never happen.
right,
So why do it?
right.
That's my thought.
Again, I
So
think,
I don't think it should be approved at this point unless we know something is with water. I was on the fire department here for 13 years. You don't have water, you're not putting anything up.
right, well,
So,
they can put a road in, but they can't build anything until water's been approved through the state. That's part of the requirements.
I just think
of
you're
all of
adding more
this.
problems than need to be. So, I appreciate you
No,
listening to me.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
How far can we carry the water discussion? I mean, is it,
We can talk about any aspect of this project that falls under our jurisdiction.
Well-
And currently, water and sewer do fall, as it is
because,
supposed to be on
you
the
know,
plans.
there was a town, I think Cohasset, had private water company for quite a few years, and then finally the town bought it because it was so expensive. What's to prevent an applicant from buying the North Carver Water Facility, running their own water company, and providing water?
Well, that
Other
would
than
be,
expense?
that would be up to the state. The state, that would have to go through the state. The town can't
We-
just
we
decide to
can
sell
make-
it.
Carver cranberry water or something out of, bottle it?
It happens to be in the middle of the Cole property, which is also a public property too, so, I
Yeah,
mean, there's
but you can
probably
have
restrictions.
leases and entities, and there's workarounds if the money talks,
Right,
you know.
there was no definitive talk on what's going to happen to the North Carver Water Department. They've already stated they can't now and never have had the ability to provide sufficient water for this project. So that's why
Well, okay, yeah.
James McLaughlin stated that any future talks should include Middleborough. So that's, again, we should have an idea of where the water's coming from. Currently,
Well,
we don't.
In the
and
big
neither
picture, but
does
in
the DEP.
where we are tonight, it has nothing to do with,
If I
Right.
may, so at the end of the day, without someone building a water distribution system, there's not going to be anything built out there.
Right?
Because the fire department has already weighed in, the North Carver Water Department has already been weighed in. We are creating roads and lots, and for anybody to use those roads and lots for anything of any substance, they're going to have to create a wastewater treatment facility, or a water treatment facility there. Or they're going to have to, fully upgrade the North Carver Water District. But that is on their nickel, on their time schedule. At this point, we've erased the old lots that were out there in the old roadway, and with this document that allows them to build a new roadway and put those pipes and that infrastructure in place, but not connect it to the
I
plant.
feel like I'm back with the military. You just do this, and we'll worry about that later, Your job, put your tent up.
Yeah,
We'll get the food out to you somehow.
it's the DEP that approves
Well,
where it
you had
comes
to put
from,
your
where it goes.
shelter half up and your poncho half, I think.
Well, yeah.
I can weigh in on that too. I guess Andy with Fuss and O'Neill again. Essentially, at this stage, there's just too many design variables with what potentially could be built out there, and the options on how to address the water demand or fire suppression, which may be a combination of water or other fire suppression means. We don't know building occupancy or size, and at the end of the day, it's the applicant's burden to figure out what options to explore and what's going to be the most cost-effective and efficient for the build-out. So I think there's sufficient conditions in the draft decision to allow the town to revisit the bigger picture of this subdivision as we have more information on individual lots as they come in as site plan review and special permits.
How far is it to the ocean? Put a desalinization plant. Get your own water, get fresh water.
7 miles.
You want solutions.
We talked about that in Kingston when they were building a manganese reduction plant. Why don't we just put a desal plant in rather than spend 18 million on a...
Now, those have come a long way with the filters now, so.
Yep.
Right. That's all I really have. Any further questions?
Bob, did you want to say something?
Oh, yes, please, it's...
Robert Belbin, 26 Gate Street. Just a couple of comments. I just walked in, so I don't know 100% of what you guys were talking about. I kind of got a thing. The urban renewal plan, if that's what you guys are talking about here, in that, they have to provide a water tower. All right? It's in there. They have to provide a water tower to increase pressure for the North Carver Water District. They tried to circumvent that by saying that the fire suppression system is that, and that's not. We already proved that that's not what the intent was. The other thing is about selling water. We have a bylaw that restricts anybody else coming in to provide water to the town residents. The only one that was exempt is the one in North Carver, where you go fill up your jugs at that one. That was exempt because it's already there prior to the bylaw was sent. So the town will never sell theirs out to somebody else to sell the water. Okay? They did sell the one in South Carver, didn't really sell it, gave it back to them. But they're not selling the water to the residents they're actually providing the water to the residents. So just my 2 cents worth.
And that's resident-owned.
And that's residents-owned, so they're not selling water. Okay, so just wanted to make sure that you understood that the bylaws say you cannot sell town water.
And bylaws can be changed.
That's true. I don't think that's going to happen here in this town. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Price is right.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, the chair will accept a motion to close the public hearing on the application of Route 44 Development LLC, requesting a definitive subdivision approval.
I'll make said motion.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Ms. Sardillo, seconded by Mr. Robinson. Mr. Bott should read the full list of conditions in regards to this.
Conditions. 1, prior to the issuance of a building permit, a true copy of the recorded decision as registered at the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds shall be submitted to the board. 2, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any revisions require approval from the board as a modification of this decision. 3, the applicant is responsible for proper operation and maintenance of the site. During construction, sedimentation and soil erosion control shall be installed, repaired, and supplemented as needed. Dust control is required during construction, and the roadway apron is to be kept clean, swept, and clear of all dust, dirt, or debris. 4, any outstanding balances of the review and inspections deposit accounts shall be paid prior to the certificate issuance of a certificate of use and occupancy. 5, the developer, their engineers, and their contractors shall hold a pre-construction conference with planning, building, conservation, health, and operation and maintenance departments prior to the start of any construction on site. Stakes shall be set to mark the boundaries of the areas to be cleared, and the clearing lines are inspected by the town prior to clearing. 6, prior to the issuance of a building permit, all easements, deed restrictions, and conveyances, if any, as submitted to the planning board, shall be executed and recorded at the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds, and shall be submitted to the Carver Planning Department. 7, applicant shall provide an easement plan showing the extent of currently anticipated utility and access easements. Easements for wastewater treatments are of particular concern since sanitary water pipe necessary is not currently proposed within the right-of-way. 8, during construction, all local, state, and federal laws shall be followed. Hours of operation for construction of the subdivision shall be Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. No construction shall take place on Sundays. 9, there shall be no bearing of stumps anywhere on the approved development site. 10, consistent with the truck routing and circulation exhibit EXA prepared by Bowler dated 1/23/24, all construction vehicles shall leave the site by making a right turn and traveling south on Green Parkway, formerly known as Montello Street, towards Main Street, Route 48, and again turning right towards Route 44. No construction vehicles shall travel northbound into Plimpton on either Montello Street or North Main.
Well, we're adding into that the truck should be entering and exiting from Route 44.
And I think you said 123. It's 13. But that's not.
Truck shall enter and exit from Route 44?
Yes.
Well, shall enter and exit using Route 44.
Yes.
That guy's a typing machine, isn't he? Not even close to spell check.
You need to put enter in after shall.
Thank you. All right. No construction vehicles shall travel north into Plimpton on Montello Street or Main Street. Trucks shall enter and exit using Route 44. 11, traffic studies will need to be prepared and updated as individual lots are submitted for site plan review and/or special permits after the subdivision is completed and lots are released. 12, all proposed curb cuts and driveways will need to be reviewed by the planning board as part of an associated site plan reviews or special permits. 13, since the stormwater management system for the subdivision crosses the right-of-way and may receive runoff from future private developments, the subdivision's drainage report shall be updated for each individual lot as part of the site plan review and special permit application in order to confirm that peak flows are mitigated, infiltration basins are adequately sized, and pipe capacities are sufficient. 14, Applicant is required to track anticipated water demands for each proposed lot development as they are submitted for site plan review or special permits. 15, fire protection, water demand, and supplies shall be submitted to the fire department as individual site plans and special permit applications are submitted to the town per Carver Fire Department memo dated November 15, 2023. 16, consistent access to the existing radio tower through construction and development shall be maintained as requested by the Assistant Deputy Fire Chief in his memo dated November 15, 2023. The applicant is required to track anticipated wastewater generation for each proposed lot development as they are submitted for site plan review and/or special permits. 18, all electrical, telephone, and other utility wires shall be placed underground, provided, however, that additional utility poles and overhead wires may be required by private utility providers as part of a project to facilitate any required upgrades and to accommodate the transition to underground, and that the utilities will return to an overhead condition near the cul-de-sac in order to tie in to the existing utility poles and overhead wires that will continue to serve the existing cell tower. 19, street light posts shall be less or equal to 25 feet in height with zero uplight at 0 degrees of tilt. 20, 2, shallow monitoring wells shall be installed adjacent to each infiltration basin in order to allow for groundwater depths to be measured and samples to be taken. These wells are intended to supplement any existing groundwater monitoring wells already installed, such as those mentioned in the fill management plan prepared by Langdon Environmental. 21, off-site improvements noted in the FEIR dated April 12th, 2012, and Chapter 30, Section 61 findings, as the same may be amended for future projects noted as prior to any occupancy that are within the planning board's purview for regulating subdivisions shall be completed. Those items include multimodal accommodations listed as 1, extensions of sidewalks and a bicycle path to Route 48 through the segment of Montella Street to be discontinued, addition of a crosswalk across Route 58 at Silo Marketplace Shopping Center, and installation of advanced warning signage, and 2, implement I was swimming along so well for a while, there wasn't. Implement signal timing improvements at Route 58 Plymouth Street intersections along with refreshing pavement markings, replace faded signage, and install advanced warning signals on the Route 58 northbound and southbound approaches. 22, due to North Carver Water Facility being offline, there should be no connections of the water lines installed within the subdivision until a connecting water distribution is approved by the North Carver Water District. And the waivers was that waiver for, to allow the scale of the sheets. Waivers requested to allow the index sheet to be at a scale of 1 to 200. F&O recommends approval of this waiver based on the technical justifications provided in their memo. Just the lots are so big. This second waiver in section 6334.dii, waiver for requirement of to provide ground elevations based on the 1925 NGV based datum. Approval of this waiver is recommended because NAVD 88 is the current datum generally accepted in the industry. Any appeals of this decision must be filed pursuant to 40A, section 17.
And we're also waiving the requirement to provide potential water source or wastewater treatment.
Waiver to provide, one more time, Connie. Say what you just said, one more time. Waiver to provide.
Waiver to provide details on water supply and wastewater.
Andy with Fuss and O'Neill, I just want to make sure that that was in there. It's not to waive supplying those services. It's waiving,
To provide
clarifying
yes,
the sources
thank
at
you.
this stage.
Clarify, yeah.
Details, clarify, dealer's choice. I would say waiver to clarify details on water supply and wastewater sources. Waiver to clarify details. Get rid of provide.
On water supply and wastewater.
In the definitive plan. This isn't, it's just for the definitive plan, it's not a definitive subdivision plan.
My bad spelling's getting better. There we have it.
Any further discussion, concerns, or questions from the board? Mr. Gatsky has his hand raised. I can't hear you, though. I think you're on mute.
Since it's discussed on the sidewalk that they're not going to need to remove any of the earth, they'll be just spreading it around. I'd like to have that in the order of conditions, that no earth removal from the site.
I think that's reasonable. I think actually you guys are bringing in a lot of dirt in order to...
Could we just amend that or add to that, say less special?
Sorry, point.
That's right.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry to yell. Zach Richards with Bowler. I think that condition makes sense. We'd just like to say, unless we were to seek such a special permit as to allow or move earth off-site, that we would still have that opportunity in the future, should there be a reason. But as stated before, we do not expect that to be the case. So
You'd have to, oh, please.
Like Andy with Fuss and O'Neill, I think if the planning board includes a condition not approving earth removal as part of the definitive subdivision plan, the applicant could still go to the earth removal committee and get approval to remove material, but it wouldn't be approved as part of the grading that's approved as part of the definitive subdivision plan. I think is...
I would think they'd have to come back to us for a modification on the decision.
I disagree with that. While earth removal is not required for subdivision, earth removal permit's not required. Earth removal committee can't come in and just say, well, since you guys want to do it, you can go ahead and do it. The idea is to make sure that this does not turn into a quarry. We have enough of that going on in town right now, and if we're going to make this a something that is attractive for businesses to come into, then let's just move the dirt around and keep it right here.
Right, because it's my understanding that you are going to be bringing dirt into this site to help level the site.
Correct.
So it shouldn't be an issue to prohibit earth removal on the site. I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of how many cubic yards?
Yeah, again, just not knowing all the operations that are ahead for the project site, we wouldn't want to preclude ourselves from ever being able to transport any materials off-site.
If somebody came in and wanted to build a giant warehouse with 5 levels of underground parking, would you have to remove dirt?
I guess my question is a condition that says to the effect that this subdivision does not imply that there is permission to remove earth from the site without proper review by the town?
I think Mr. Gatsky has a point, considering the amount of dirt that needs to be brought in, that it should be prohibited unless approved through the planning board in regards to a specific project that may be proposed.
So when a project comes into the planning board, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Andy, they bring in, here's our site, here's our grading plan. And so when we look at that, we have an idea what's on the grading plan, whether it's a balanced site or not. So at that point, when someone proposes something, we know, and that's essentially the planning board's approval, is that you've looked at this plan that Andy has vetted. The site, the previous existing conditions are here. When the site's done, it's going to be here. By approving that site plan, you're approving that grading and that moving of the dirt.
Right, so at this point, earth removal can be prohibited, and then we can approve it on a project-by-project basis. I think that would be appropriate. Would that meet?
I guess to clarify, as part of the definitive subdivision, right, we are okay with no soil.
You've already given us the grades that everything's going to be brought to, and you're going to bringing in considerable amount of dirt to bring the lot to that level.
Under the definitive subdivision,
Yes. Yes. So the board okay with the prohibition on earth removal? Yep.
So what are my magic words for line 23?
Mr. Gatsky, earth removal is prohibited unless under an approved site plan?
Correct, that's what I'm looking for.
All right.
Thank you.
And that will give you something to work with.
Okay. Could we add earth removal is prohibited under the definitive subdivision unless approved by the planning board?
Earth removal is permitted under this subdivision.
Under the definitive, yeah.
Say that one more time.
Earth removal is prohibited under this definitive subdivision plan unless approved by the planning board on a subsequent site plan.
Approved site plan.
Definitive A, I can't see that for a definitive A subdivision.
Look behind you.
It's an, oh, it's just, you got A I need some spell check there on subdivision.
Earth removal is prohibited under this definitive subdivision plan. Unless approved by the planning board on a subsequent approved site plan.
This time you have definitive subdivision plan, all three in caps. Your last one you had just one. You had, if you're gonna have, is it all capital?
We can remove the word subsequent. And maybe earth removal should be, no, mine. Is that fine with you, Mr. Gatsky? Currently, it reads, earth
Yeah.
removal is
Yes,
prohibited.
that'll work.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I just have a point of clarification for Mr. Bott on the statute that's
Could you-
referenced?
could you please
Oh, sorry,
identify
yes.
yourself?
This is Susan Murphy from Dane Torpy for the applicant. I just want to have a point of clarification on the last sentence that say appeals must be filed pursuant to Chapter 40A. I believe that might be Chapter 41, Section 81BB, which is the subdivision control law.
Obviously,
So
this
that-
was lifted from our site plan.
Yeah,
special
no,
permit.
that's okay. I just noticed it after I
All right.
sat down, so I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
If you would be so kind as to.
Oh, sure, that was
Chapter 41.
Chapter 41, Section 81BB, as in boy, double B.
41, section 81BB.
BB.
They got a lot of work out of that section. Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
So the chair will accept the motion to close, or did we make the motion already to close the public hearing?
I've got motion to close. I don't know if we had a vote.
Okay.
Maybe we did. Ellen moved, Kevin seconded.
So the motion on the floor is to close the public hearing. Mr. Gatsky?
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye.
So a motion to approve the subdivision plan with the above conditions and waivers.
The chair will accept a motion to approve the application of Route 44 Development LLC requesting a definitive subdivision approval and entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan for Route 44 Development LLC, Route 44 Commerce Park.
I'll make said motion.
Motion made by Ms. Sardillo. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Williams. Do we have any further discussion in regards to the order of conditions? So, Mr. Gatsky?
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all for your time and input.
You have a good evening. All right. Our next order of business is request from Earth Removal Committee for comments regarding E.J. Pontiff Cranberries, 104 Tremont Street, map 123, lot 13-0. We received a letter that should be entered into the file, but I don't think it's directly bearing on this because it's a request to add something in that we don't have the power to add in, so.
So, as if I may, this is interesting that the earth removal bylaw says that the earth removal committee will submit plans to Conservation Planning Board, Police and Fire, similar role that we have when we send out site plans and special permits to all these agencies, all these boards and committees. So that bylaw says if there's an earth removal request, send it to the planning board for comment. When we look at the zoning bylaw and under site plans, it says the planning board does site plans except it doesn't do site plans for earth removal. So it's one of those interesting things that people oftentimes put into a bylaw that says, well, we should have somebody who looks at these things all the time look at it. So the general bylaw says we should send it to the planning board for their review and comment, but our zoning bylaw says that we don't have the we don't have the jurisdiction to impose. It's not under our jurisdiction. So with that in mind, and looking at these things, I think that probably the intent of this was, since the planning board's seen more than these things, maybe they got conditions that we might want to impose upon an earth removal permit. The one that comes to mind for me, and it's problematic in lots of places, is that where the road that they're working on at that lot comes to the street, that there should be a 50-foot construction entrance. Is that 50 foot? Is that pretty much the standard number, Andy? So a 50-foot construction entrance. And what that is that's rough gravel for 50 feet before you get to the roadway, and that's designed to knock as much dirt off the tires of the vehicle as it's leaving the site, so that dirt doesn't get carried onto the road and fill up the catch basins down the street.
But it would include a concrete apron next to the road to knock all that gravel off the tires and such?
So I can weigh in on that. Andy with Fuss and O'Neill
If
again.
these big trucks are coming over from gravel onto the paved road surface, it's going to, especially heavy trucks, it's going to destroy that.
So the intent of the construction entrance is to actually have a clean stone without the fines in it. And then the reason for the length of that construction entrance is so that the wheels will revolve multiple times on that construction entrance, and the stone itself helps remove the mud and dirt that's built up on the tires, and then over time, that construction entrance will need to be replaced. That's part of the ongoing maintenance. But I think what you're getting at is actual damage to potentially the edge of pavement where that stone intersects the road, which would be a separate item where typically for construction sites would be something that would be coordinated with operation and maintenance staff on what that transition looks like and whether or not they'd want asphalt apron paved and what that dimensions that apron would be to basically protect the existing roadway and then have the paved apron act as that transition space from the construction entrance, which is serving to remove the sediment, and then really that paved apron is protecting the roadway, so it puts the burden of the developer to maintain their paved apron and not damage the shoulder of the road.
Right, not the town to come back in and fix it up. So adding that apron to accommodate heavy vehicles and prevent damage to the town road would be one of my recommendations. Change sheets to remove proposed buildings 1 through 5 and replace with with the term cranberry bogs.
I'm pretty sure that's what it said on the plan, because you had asked me about that.
Right, I had asked you about it, but on the plan it says proposed building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's,
Is that, it looks like Bill has the plan in front of him, is that what it says?
I have proposed bond.
Oh, okay, because mine said proposed building. Okay, so yeah, it's been changed. It should be noted that the planning board is not approving a site plan. The proposed truck route is insufficient to allow the passing of heavy vehicles and should be widened, or a second alternate route should be proposed for access egress for trucks heading in the opposite direction. Or widen the road.
so you're talking about the Hall Road?
The Hall Road, yeah, 18 feet is not wide enough for 2 heavy trucks to pass each other. So, the road, are they only gonna have 1 truck on site at a time?
Well, it's out in the
It's over
woods.
1 million square feet
Yeah,
of dirt, so.
It's out in the woods and there's a lot of dirt to work with. I think trying to construct a road
Well, that's.
is likely gonna
right.
create more issues.
That's the issue, so a secondary route, you can't have, what, are they gonna have 30 trucks a day to try and pass each other coming in and out? There's gotta be safety issues, it's all surrounded by water. If a truck goes off the road filled with diesel fuel, it's gonna be catastrophic. So something needs to be done to address that, either widen the road or propose a one-way route in and one-way route out. That's just a recommendation, because trucks go into the water in Carver all the time.
Well, I think as a practical matter, and we'll plug that in, but maybe it's the thing is just to ensure there's sufficient spots for a vehicle to pull over and allow them to
I
pass.
suppose that, yep, they're gonna, yeah, that would be fine too, but it's not on the maps. Again, alternates, there's plenty other ways, but it should be noted that 2 vehicles cannot pass in opposite directions on these roads without creating safety and.
So apron, construction entrance, ability for 2 trucks to pass.
Yeah. What would they call that?
Use of pullouts.
Pullouts,
Pullouts, yeah.
cutouts.
Or even an alternate route for the opposite direction. A spill plan, due to the nature of the roads and their location, should be provided to and approved by the fire department, as well as access.
A what plan?
A spill plan in case a truck does go into the bogs. Should be due to
Plan
the,
provided to fire department?
yeah, should be provided and approved by the fire department, as well as access for fire trucks. And I think 18 feet is well beyond their requirement.
Okay.
Special consideration should be done for all activities in the natural heritage priority habitat and wetland protection areas.
Care used in areas of natural habitat.
Activities in the natural heritage priority habitat and wetland protection areas. All trucks should be covered and wet suppression used on site.
Okay.
Roadways and storm drains must be kept clean. And an appropriate buffer zone for all activities should be delineated along the property lines.
And what was that last one?
An appropriate buffer zone for all activities should be delineated along the property line. Because it looks like there's going to be a huge drop-off at some point. How much of a
Buffer zone for all activities.
An appropriate buffer zone for all activities should be delineated along property lines. Andy, what does it look like, the drop-off, I mean, from ground level to what the proposed is? Can you tell from?
I can look into that. I'm not prepared to answer that at the
Because
moment.
I'm not sure if an engineering structure is required in this particular case, depending on, because I couldn't tell from what was given to us, like what the drop-off is gonna be.
Are you referring to like the shoulder of the?
No, they're removing a lot of earth, and because they're removing a lot of earth, it's gonna create a large drop-off area, right? And at what point does the drop-off area have to be engineered?
Well, so Fuss & O'Neill hasn't reviewed the specific grading for this agenda item this evening, but in general, typical practice is to maintain a 3-to-1 slope at a minimum, and then after that, you need to look at other stabilization options, whether those are stone or riprap or some sort of turf reinforcement matting or other means, sometimes tiered grading approaches. So there's a lot of options out there, but essentially, general rule of thumb is if you're looking at anything steeper than 3-to-1, then it would want to be taken a closer look at to make sure that that slope is going to not be susceptible to real erosion over time and can be, accessed and maintained.
So I think that's a pretty fair recommendation, is the 3-to-1 slope recommendation. All right.
Maintain a 3-to-1 slope.
Further comments? Questions, concerns, recommendations? All right.
Very well.
Oh, yes, when I suppose, when I was looking at a computer, it looked like BLG or BLDG rather than BOG, so that's where my confusion came in. All right. Mr. Bott's got his hands full, so the chair will take the meeting minutes out of order, and the chair will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 5th, 2023.
Make that said motion?
Motion made by Mr. Robinson,
Second?
second. Any edits?
I don't seem to have the printout of it. Because it was on. That's not the one. I looked at them at home on the computer this morning, so I'm all set.
No? Everybody all set with them? All right, Mr. Gatsky? Motion to approve.
John Gasky says aye.
Evan Robinson says aye.
Ms. Sardilli, you
Oh,
abstain?
I'm sorry. Yes, I wasn't there.
Okay, no worries.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. All right. The chair will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 19th, 2023.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky,
I'll second that.
second by Mr. Williams. Further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gatsky.
John Gasky says aye.
Evan Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. All right. Town planner notes?
So we've been having a discussion about town meeting articles. So we had a couple of fits and starts on advertising them because we're waiting for the final draft of the zoning bylaw that's being recodified in order to put it online. So our zoning bylaw isn't changing, it's just changing its form, its numbering, so they can put it online and it'll be searchable. But it is a change of the zoning bylaw, so it has to go to town meeting with a hearing. So we have got the final draft of that information as of today. So we're able to schedule the hearings for town meeting articles for March 12th. That's much later than I would typically want to do that, but frankly, there's not a whole lot on the warrant zoning-wise for town meeting, other than the recodification. Now, in an email that I sent you, we had talked a couple times, Connie talked a couple times about changes to the frontage size of lots. That was, I didn't find in the master plan, but it was, as Connie sent it to me, in the 2001 master plan. And so the question I asked the board in an email is that, you know, if this was in the 2017 master plan, it wouldn't be much debate about, yeah, that should be on the warrant for town meeting. But the question is, should something that was in the 2001 master plan, that's not in the 2017 master plan, be something we're bringing to town meeting as a change? A lot of towns looked at increasing lot sizes, increasing frontage and things like that as a way to discourage zoning. That has not been, was probably in fashion at the time, but isn't what people are looking to today. In fact, what we're hearing on a pretty regular basis is that housing is hard, housing is expensive because of the amount of regulations and things that we have. So I told Connie, said, well, you know, since this is 2001, written 25 years ago, likely we should have the board say, do we want to put this on the warrant or not, and take a vote on it. My take would be likely not, because it's not one of those things that's proposed in the current master plan. But if the board wants to say, yeah, let's bring this thing from 2001 and put it on the warrant, we'll advertise it and see what town meeting, how town meeting feels about it.
Now, we're not doing this like Wellesley or Concord to create an exclusive neighborhood. The benefits are clearly outlined, and it was until the 2017 master plan came along 7 years ago, it was something we were supposed to have done anyways. Some of the benefits are to lower density in the residential agricultural, to encourage development towards conservation, cluster subdivisions, transfer of development rights, and village centers. To rather than, and it's part of our mission to slow down the sprawl and to concentrate development in areas that the town has deemed appropriate, which would be village centers by use of transfer of development rights and conservation subdivisions to help protect the open space and the natural resources. It'll help provide for a wider mix of housing stock by directing development to these areas. And specifically, the benefits, as listed in the original master plan, are to protect the rural character, the impact on the town's budgets, town services, protect groundwater, preservation of agricultural lands, protecting resource areas, protecting open space in the environment. I mean, one of the, and I'm not asking us to approve this, we're talking about bringing it to the town meeting and letting them discuss it, but it specifically says, and it's over and over, increase minimum lot size in the 2017, up to 2017. The town should increase the minimum size to 2 acres. This alone will result in a reduction of the potential residential build-out by as much as approximately 30%. Increasing the minimum lot size can have the adverse effect of consuming excessive open space at a faster rate, and that's what we're trying to stop, because our water comes from the ground. There's no government's going to come in and provide us water in this town. What we have is what we have. It can encourage use of our conservation subdivisions, protect the resources in open space, and if combined with other changes to zoning and subdivision regulations, in regards to villages. We already did the TDRs just 2 years ago to make them more user-friendly and more accessible. But I'm just asking that the list of benefits to this are extensive, and I'm asking the board to bring it to town meeting and let the town decide.
I've spoken on this before, and I agree with half of it and disagree with the other half. I agree with upping the, clusters and all those, that's fine, but I don't agree with increasing the lot size. If you want to buy a house and you're going to put 2 acres of land instead of 1.5 acres, and you're going to put 200 feet of frontage on a new street, you're going to have to, sidewalks and roadways, and I said my daughter lives in Ponds at Plymouth. Those roads they got to be 40 feet wide, and they go on for miles, and it's just longer bus routes, longer everything, further.
Well, the intent is to push it to the cluster subdivision so that isn't the problem, so that
you do that
the
by
smaller lots.
By making the cluster zoning better. It is more of an incentive, but for a single house lot or 2 or 3 houses,
I've already discussed with Mr. Bott, addressing the conservation subdivision bylaws to add more incentives to get them in there. But at what point are incentives going to be enough to stop the sprawl and
when
to
house prices come down.
right? But if you can put 10 houses on a conservation subdivision that would otherwise only take 4 houses, where's the development going to go?
You have to have the clientele that want to live in that style location. You have clientele that wants to have their own house, their own yard, their own swing set in the back. The kids can run around and go cuckoo without bothering the neighbors. You have to have the demand
Where's the
And-
largest, where is the largest population points in Massachusetts? They're in Boston, they're in Worcester, they're in Brockton,
The
and
east
those
of
aren't big yards.
128. Yeah.
That's, it's not big yards. I grew up in the suburbs of Newton, back when it was a suburb, and
I grew up, I had a house in Marshfield with 3,800 square foot lot.
right? That
That's-
would have been large compared to what I grew up on. We had 5 feet on one side.
Well, this is,
and-
the rural character is make my house and leave me plenty of woods.
uh,
We can agree to disagree, that's.
Well,
I
the
vote
issue
once
is the
and you vote
sprawl. It's how the development is going forward, and it's just sprawling all over the place, and we need to get a handle on that. And that is specifically listed in the 2017 master plan.
the T plan, whatever that one comes down the road, and you're gonna be building houses.
Yeah, we'll be at that's next year's town meeting, no spoilers.
Again, that's a higher density area that we should be putting to attract these developments.
And you're gonna higher density, and where you gonna get the water when you put all the houses in a smaller space? can't-
Again, where they get the water for a project of that size, it's gonna, well, it specifically says, the development that the increase in development should, be based on, common wells and septic systems for certain areas.
Well, we can go 6 stories high then. We can be
Well,
apartment
it's
condos.
limited by our town bylaws.
But if
and
the
the fire
state says you're gonna build 4-story, 5-story houses, the town, they don't care about the town bylaw.
We can
I mean, we're
always.
gonna go, this, this is just round in circles forever. I
Right,
mean,
so I just want
Yeah.
to see it taken to the town and have them decide. This isn't something that we're going to pass here or not. It's whether or not we want the town to have a chance to make this decision. And I believe the town should have the
And-
opportunity to
And
weigh
the
in
state's
on
gonna
this.
come along and do a lot of decision-making down the road for a lot of places too, so.
They are, and if we're not established before the state comes in and starts forcing us to establish
And the state
certain,
will override whatever bylaw you have.
well, then they can do that. That is within the power of the state.
And there are towns that don't want to do the T thing, and the state's already, fine, we'll take you to court, see you in court, sonny, Some towns are, no, we don't want to do that. Well, state doesn't care. If the
Right.
state, that's the hierarchy. We're at the bottom.
Right?
We're the PFC.
Although a lot of power is given by the state, and that's the reason that us 5 people who live in the town of Carver, or 6, are sitting up here, is because a broad range of jurisdiction is given over to local authorities because they are familiar with the local sites and the local locations.
That is not, what is not mentioned in the Constitution is left to the states, so.
Okay, any thoughts, Mr. Gatsky? I don't want to forget you back there.
Personally, I think that if we want to put it out to the town, let the town decide.
So the chair will.
They should be voting on everything.
The chair will make a motion to bring it to a public hearing for town meeting.
The chair making the motion is one.
Chair will accept the motion.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Motion made by Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Sardillo. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gatsky?
Fred Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
Don Williams says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. All right. What else do we have to put on town meeting?
That's it?
I would, again, we discussed, and I know the town's in a tough time, but bringing the stipend of the planning board back to its prior.
Yeah, that's not a town meeting, or that's a budget article. I think we talked about that with my meeting.
Well, I think last time we talked about this, I was told that this is something that is brought before the town. And I'm not proposing it for it to take effect until after we're approving the 2024, 20 through 2025 budget. I'm not asking it to be put on till July 1st, 2025 for the 2025, 26 budget. It's $5,000. These people work hard for their town. They put a lot of time, they put a lot of their own money, and they put a lot of effort into working for this town. We had hoped to do it over a period of time, but I'm not going to be here. So I would like to see these people their expenses appropriately covered. We did it for years. We took a huge cut in our stipend. It came out of our pockets to make up the difference. And it should be commensurate with the other boards. What's the current stipend for the planning, for the select board? 2,000, 2,500?
I don't know.
And we're asking for, what's our budget? Our budget's somewhere around 45, 50 million. We're asking for $5,000.
There was discussion of that at the Saturday morning 6-hour finance meeting, and it was not well received.
The discussion of?
Yeah, the stipend, I brought it to the.
The stipend.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, well, it
And
wasn't, and we weren't talking about doing it for this coming year. We were putting it out ahead, so it gives the town, but again,
I've worked with municipal budgets since 1970, and not one year have I ever heard, we got money this year.
it
We're
never
gonna be able to
happened.
do, every year this is the doom and the gloom, and we're gonna have to cut. In
Yeah.
53 years, we're dealing with budgets. There's never been a town that's come out and said, we got money this year.
The town will never have money, and we're not looking to take money out of
No.
people's pockets. We're just looking not to have to
never
spend
have
our money to do our
Even a
job.
little to help push something, so.
The town pays off contracts, but we paid off our last town, well, a couple town administrators, we paid him off for 3 years. It wasn't I think we just paid off our former tax assessor for another 6 months too. Let's take care of the people who are working for the town, who are putting their own money, who made sacrifices over all the years that we've loaded, and I think it should go to the town to decide.
Are we in a deficit as far as the money that Carver has?
We're always
We
in a
can't-
deficit.
No, we
And
don't,
we're
we can't
not asking
deficit
for
spend.
this coming year. We're asking for the 2025, 2020 through 2026, and my term will be up by then.
The town of Carver does
I
not
don't have-
deficit budget, though.
A financial interest in this. The stipend used to be $2,000 for the chairman, $1,800 for the individuals. The town sees hard times. We reduced our stipend years ago.
Will it make our taxes go up if we get paid more? Will it make,
Depends
No.
if something else goes.
No, the taxes are gonna go up either way.
Yeah, your taxes are going up
They're gonna go up as
by,
much as they can
Yeah.
every year.
your house is gonna be reassessed and all this, and we're not
Something won't
asking,
get funded.
we're not
something
asking
won't get
for
that.
budget-breaking money. We're asking for roughly $5,000 or $6,000. And again, not to take effect until the 2025, 2026 year. And last year, we didn't have to go in front of, I didn't have to go in front of the FinCom because
Well,
this
that
can be put,
was- yeah,
but we
that
did
was-
because, well, I felt at that time, but it wasn't, it's not well received. No asking for money is well received at any point, and that's their job, and that's how it should be. They have a difficult job. We're not looking to lay off teachers to pay the planning board an appropriate amount to cover their expenses. That's not what we're doing. So, I don't know where that leaves us. I don't know if we have to vote on this or not, or if you feel it's appropriate, then we should.
Well, if it's for a year-out budget, it wouldn't be,
Well, they can vote on it, and it'll give the town a year to come up with the whopping $5,000 or
can
$6,000.
one town meeting carry over the vote for a year later, though?
The town, I believe they can, yeah. We budget out well over a year, and this should, giving them a year is not taking anybody by surprise, and it gives them a year to appropriately plan for it. The select board raised theirs up to, I don't even know at this point, $2,500 or $2,200, and they did that a couple years ago. A couple other boards started getting stipends, as well they should.
There was, at that finance committee meeting, a reference to having a committee formed to go through all the town boards to see what the stipends are and come up with recommendations for all boards, not just the planning board.
Right, well, there's 67 boards and committees in town, and how many of them actually get stipends?
Well, that's
there's
maybe the
very
first
few. Is it?
task of the committee then.
Right? Does the FinCom get a stipend? I don't know.
Yeah, it's $150.
$150.
School
And that's
committees-
absolutely bare minimum.
I know school committees, and some towns do and don't, and I think it's the school committee that votes their own stipend because of their separate budget.
Well, ours is to go through
Right.
town meeting. That's how it's put
Right,
on
but
the
the school, I
warrant
think
as
school committees can
specific.
do their own because within their own budget. Because they get a lump sum and they divide it how they please. I mean, they in charge of their own funds.
I expect people can make recommendations in regards to it, but unless, I don't know where Mr. Bott got off to, but I wonder, we should probably wait till he comes back before we make any
Right.
decision.
Do we have member notes, or can we see
Yeah,
something?
any member notes?
I'd just like to announce, I have the 3-year seat, and I am not going up for election. I don't know if somebody in the vast studio audience has kind of dwindled. And the home audience may be watching something else. And I know there are anywhere from 55 to 60 people who watch the YouTube rebroadcast, so I don't know if that's getting the word out or not. So
Right?
there's still time to join this happy group.
Yeah, there's actually, yep. Plus, there's several other openings on boards and committees
Others.
in this town that are coming up that nobody's put papers for.
Right. And I think that's getting smaller, though, because the town clerk just put out a new list and there were fewer,
Oh, she put out a new list?
right?
Excellent, excellent.
So they're still widowing it down. But
Well, I'm sad that you're ending your,
my voice just can't take it by this time of night.
Is the subdivision decision.
Thank you. So what would be the issues of bringing an adjustment to the stipend for the planning board to town meeting?
I'll give it to the town administrator tomorrow. See where it goes.
Because as, I believe you explained it to me that that's how it's done.
Yeah, so typically these things would come in the budget. So we do the budget in October. And I don't know that I was aware of that at that time when we submitted the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Glines. And that's okay, and that's why we're preparing to a year out now,
Yep.
rather than having to crunch numbers or
Just pass it along.
everybody seems to have one down
Right,
there. I'll
so-
return it to you in a
Okay.
moment. All right, so how does the board feel about bringing it for not this coming year's? For putting it on the warrant, but not for this coming fiscal year, for the following fiscal year?
see how that goes, yeah.
Mr. Gatsky, thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts on it.
No in favor or against?
Like I said, I think that everything that we're talking about that needs, that needs some sort of approval or anything else like that, definitely should be pushed up to town meeting, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep, especially money articles. Mr. Robinson?
I'll wait to hear what Mr. Bott has to get for information from the town administrator.
Excellent. All right. We'll be back next week, right? So we have a planning board meeting next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, correct?
Correct, we are expecting to see the Weathering folks back on Silver Street as well as the Elks.
Excellent, excellent. All right, any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, the chair will accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll make said motion.
Motion made by Ms. Sardillo,
Second?
seconded by Mr. Robbins, sorry, Mr. Williams.
Nobody wants to go home.
Mr. Gatsky?
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
Mr. Williams?
Says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you all and have a good evening.